the alarms didn't sound, but something inside the old post office shifted a low, metallic groan, like the building itself was exhaling after 50 years. Dust rained down from the ceiling. A single locker door creaked open, unprovoked. Behind it, an envelope yellow, sealed in red wax half buried under rust and spider silk. Outside, the demolition crew shouted over the wind. They were minutes away from tearing it all down. Then the generator lights flickered, one by one, across the empty hall. And for a split second, someone swore they heard it. The faint scratch of a pen, writing from somewhere that shouldn't exist. The echo faded. Silence returned, and in that silence, the story of a promise long forgotten was finally ready to be found. The wind outside howled through the broken windows of the old Wyndham post office. Inside, under a flickering yellow light, Claire Evans wiped dust from a row of forgotten metal mailboxes. Most had been empty for decades, until her screwdriver slipped, and a rusted door marked 214 popped open with a hollow clang. A small envelope slid out yellowed, sealed with a hardened wax stamp the color of old blood. Across its face, in neat fading ink, read, "To Miss Lillian Hart, Greenville, South Carolina," and in the corner, smaller letters, "Private Jack Monroe, Apo, San Francisco, 96411. Claire turned it over carefully. The back carried a faint imprint pressed into the wax. "For Bobby, deliver if I don't make it." She stared at the words for a long time, as if they might breathe. The paper trembled slightly in her gloved hands. Her coworker, Gary, leaned in from behind a pile of boxes. "Don't tell me you opened one of those," he muttered. "Federal law, Claire. You touch that, you're toast." She nodded, pretending to set it aside, but her eyes never left the envelope. When the others clocked out, Claire stayed. The room was silent, except for the steady tick of an antique wall clock and the groan of winter wind through cracked wood. She laid the envelope under the lamp. The handwriting was slow, deliberate, someone who took time even when time was running out. She whispered the return address aloud, testing the rhythm. "Private Jack Monroe, APO, San Francisco, 96411. That number, it rang familiar from something she'd read. She pulled her phone and typed it in. Results appeared instantly. APO 96411. Khe Sanh, Vietnam War. Claire exhaled, her breath clouding the cold air. For a second, she could almost hear the low whump of helicopter blades. Faint radio chatter. A man's voice reading coordinates through static. The old walls of the post office seemed to breathe. And then, a flash of memory not her own. A soldier crouched in a muddy trench. Rain pouring, lightning slicing the night sky. He wrote by flashlight, lips moving as if whispering a prayer. Back in the present, Claire blinked hard, the vision gone. She slid the envelope back into its metal slot, then pulled it out again, like she couldn't decide which century she belonged to. Her job was to document, catalog, discard. But this felt alive. In the corner of the desk sat a box labeled "To be destroyed, January." Everything inside would be shredded before the building's demolition next week. The envelope had been inches away from being erased forever. That thought landed heavy. Claire took a photo of the address, the wax seal, the handwriting. Then, hesitating only once, she slipped the real envelope into her coat pocket. The paper felt warm against her chest, like it had waited for this exact moment. Later, in her car, she held it under the dome light. The wax seal shimmered faintly as the engine idled. Something about the words "deliver, if I don't make it" pressed into her chest. It wasn't just a note. It was a promise that never got its chance. The next morning, she dug through the digital archive system. Buried under layers of faded microfilm scans, she found it. 42nd Infantry Battalion. Echo Wolves. Operating in Khe Sanh, 1970. Among the listed names, Private Jack Monroe. Status missing in action. Below it, another. Captain Robert Hale. Same unit. Killed in action. Claire sat back in her chair. The wax stamp's faint imprint. For Bobby now had a name. Robert "Bobby" Hale. The man who was supposed to deliver the letter. She leaned closer to her screen, eyes reflecting the glow of the old database. The 42nd had been ambushed during Operation Iron Harbor, a mission classified for decades. Most of their mail never made it out of the jungle, but somehow, this one did, only to vanish inside a wall for 54 years. Claire opened a map of Vietnam from that era. Khe Sanh, a red circle. A note in the margin of a declassified file read, Echo Wolves. Last transmission recorded at dawn. The image of the soldier writing by flashlight returned in her mind. Vivid. Impossible. She rubbed her arms, shivering despite the heater humming low. At home that night, she placed the envelope on her kitchen table beside her laptop. Coffee steamed in her hand as she scrolled through military records. Every trail led back to the same thing. One lost letter, one vanished unit. Somewhere between war and peace. This promise got stuck in time, she whispered. Half to herself, half to the silent envelope. Maybe it's waiting for me. Her cat brushed against her leg, purring softly. Outside, snow began to fall, tapping the window like distant Morse code. Claire looked up, lost in thought. In the reflection of the glass, she almost saw him, the young soldier. Wet, dirty, exhausted, looking straight back at her. She blinked, and he was gone. Only the letter remained, resting quietly under the kitchen light. That night, she didn't sleep. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the same thing. A hand placing the envelope into a field mailbox, a flare bursting overhead, a voice shouting over the chaos. Make sure it gets there, Bobby. Promise me. Claire woke at dawn. The world outside still gray and frozen. She stared at the envelope lying where she'd left it. There were 100 reasons to hand it over to authorities, and one reason not to. She chose the one. She picked it up, slid it carefully into her bag, and whispered the words printed across the front. To Miss Lillian Hart, Greenville, South Carolina. The promise that never made it. Until now. Snow melted into gray slush along the interstate as Claire drove south. The envelope sat on the passenger seat, wrapped in a clear plastic sleeve, catching bits of pale sunlight through the windshield. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone should have done this years ago, but somehow, the job had waited until her. At a rest stop outside Richmond, she opened her laptop. She typed again. Private Jack Monroe, 42nd Infantry Battalion, Echo Wolves. The results came faster this time. Declassified documents, a few veterans' message boards, one faded memorial post. Jack Monroe listed missing in action. March 12, 1970. Below his name appeared another Captain Robert Hale. Status: killed in action. March 26, 1970. Her breath caught. The same Bobby pressed into the wax seal. Claire leaned back. The hum of trucks filling the air outside. Two names, tied to one unit, one letter. One promise frozen in a wall for half a century. She found one more entry, Lillian Hart, listed as next of kin. No death record. No obituary. Just a line from a county nursing registry in South Carolina. By nightfall, she was there, Greenville. The town glowed soft under strings of Christmas lights. She parked outside Rose Hill Senior Living and checked her reflection in the window. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the envelope. Inside, the air smelled of lavender and disinfectant. An attendant guided her to a sunlit atrium, where an elderly woman sat by a window. Lillian Hart. Her hair was white as snow, gathered neatly behind her head. She looked up slowly, kind eyes sharpening with curiosity. Claire introduced herself gently. She spoke about the old post office, about the sealed box, about a letter that had never been sent. Lillian didn't move. Then her hand lifted thin, trembling, reaching for the envelope. The moment her fingers brushed it, she froze. Her breath hitched. I know this handwriting, she whispered. Her eyes filled, not from shock, but recognition. Jack. The name lingered in the air like a ghost. Claire sat across from her, listening as Lillian's voice thinned into memory. He was 23. Always wrote in blue ink, always slanted to the left. He said he'd send me one letter for every moon. The last one came in June, 1969. After that, nothing. Lillian looked down at the sealed wax, tracing it like a scar. His friend came back. Bobby Hale. He told me Jack didn't make it home. Said there was a letter, but it got lost. I thought he just couldn't face me. Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. She'd spent 50 years doing that already. Claire hesitated. Captain Robert Hale? Lillian nodded faintly. Yes. The one they called Bobby. Claire pulled her phone, scrolling to a digital record. It showed Bobby Hale's service photo, young, square jaw, smile halfway between pride and exhaustion. She turned it toward Lillian. The old woman's eyes lit for a second. That's him. Do you know what happened to him? Claire asked softly. Lillian shook her head. All I heard, he died after coming home. Car accident, I think. No one ever told me more. That didn't fit the report Claire had seen earlier. According to the archive, Hale died in a warehouse explosion tied to a postal transfer center in San Diego. 1971. A fire. Hundreds of military packages destroyed. One of the burned files listed under recovery, APO96411. The same code from the envelope. The puzzle pieces snap together like magnets. Jack writes the letter. Bobby promises to deliver it. Bobby returns, but dies in the fire before he can send it. The letter gets buried literally inside a post office wall. Claire's pulse raced. She looked up, meeting Lillian's weary gaze. "Do you still want to know what's inside?" she asked quietly. The older woman closed her eyes. "I've wanted to know for 50 years, she said. "But I don't know if I can take it now." Claire respected that. She sealed the letter back in its sleeve. Lillian reached across the table, placing a frail hand on hers. "If you find who was supposed to send it," she whispered, "tell him." I never stopped waiting. That night, Claire stayed in a motel off Highway 25. Rain pattered on the roof like slow applause. She stared at the glowing laptop screen, the search bar empty. "Robert Hale wife," she typed. A name appeared. Martha Hale, age 79, Lewisburg, Tennessee. No obituary, no relocation notice. Just a phone number attached to a decades-old property record. She hesitated, then dialed. One ring. Two. A tired voice answered. "Hello? Mrs. Hale?" Claire asked carefully. "My name's Claire Evans. I work with the Postal Archive Division in Maine. I found something that belonged to your husband." Silence on the other end. Then, slowly, "You mean Bobby?" Her tone shifted, half suspicion, half hope. "Yes," Claire said. "It's about a letter from his friend, Jack Monroe." A breath hitched through the line. Then, quietly, "I think you'd better come here." Claire ended the call and sat there a long moment, listening to the storm. Lightning flashed, reflecting off the sealed envelope lying on the table. It looked alive again, pulsing with invisible energy. Whatever waited in Tennessee, it was the next step. She gathered her things, packing the letter like evidence. Outside, rain slicked the asphalt, turning streetlights into pale streaks. The wipers beat a steady rhythm as she drove. Miles rolled under her tires like pages turning themselves. As she crossed the state line, fatigue set in, but the road refused to end. The hum of the engine lulled her halfway between waking and memory. For a moment, she could hear a man's voice again, steady, calm, military clear. "Echo Wolves, this is Monroe. Package secure. Tell her I kept my promise." The sound faded with the storm. She blinked, gripping the wheel tighter. The radio static murmured softly, like someone breathing on the other side of time. By dawn, Claire reached Lewisburg. A single-lane road led up a gentle hill where an old wooden house sat alone among bare trees. Smoke curled from the chimney. She parked, engine still running, watching the windows glow faintly with firelight. In her lap, the envelope waited. 54 years late, but right on time. She stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath her boots. The sky was pale silver, the kind that made you feel small and seen at the same time. When she knocked, the sound echoed through the quiet morning. The door opened slowly. An elderly woman stood there, sharp eyes, weathered face, a cane in her hand. "Martha Hale?" The old woman nodded once. Her gaze fell to the envelope in Claire's hand, and her lips parted just slightly. "I wondered," she said, her voice thin as paper, "if that thing would ever find its way home." The door creaked open wider. Martha Hale stepped aside without a word, motioning for Claire to enter. The house smelled faintly of cedar and rain. A wood stove crackled in the corner, throwing soft amber light across walls lined with old photographs. Claire noticed one right away. Two young men in uniform, arms around each other, grinning through dirt and exhaustion. A brass plate beneath the frame read, "Khe Sanh, Vietnam. Echo Wolves, 1970. Martha's eyes followed her gaze. "That's Bobby and Jack," she said quietly. Before everything went to hell, they sat at the kitchen table. Between them, the envelope lay under the yellow light like something sacred. Martha's hands were steady despite her age. "I knew this would come back someday," she said. "My husband never could let it go." Claire leaned forward. "You knew about the letter?" Martha nodded. "He carried it home. Told me it was written by a man who died saving his life. Said it was meant for a girl named Lillian." Her voice dropped lower, the kind reserved for confessions. "He tried to mail it once, but when he read the return line, 'If I don't make it, tell her I kept my promise,' he froze. He said it didn't feel right. He was the one who made it back, not Jack." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, long and slow. Martha folded her hands. Bobby came home a different man. He'd sit up nights, staring at that letter like it was judging him. He said he'd deliver it himself one day, but he never did. Claire waited. The clock ticked between them. Martha finally stood and shuffled toward a small chest near the window. From inside, she pulled a tarnished metal tin and set it on the table. It clinked with the weight of something more than keepsakes. When she opened it, Claire saw a thin silver bracelet, warped by heat, the words still legible. "Until I return." Martha traced the engraving with a finger. Bobby said Jack gave this to him when they were pinned down in that jungle. Said he swore to take it home if Jack didn't make it. It's not about Nodasterius. She glanced toward the stove flame, her eyes reflecting orange. The fire that killed Bobby. It was no accident. He was working at a postal depot, sorting military return mail. There was a spark, a flash. Everything burned. He crawled out with that tin in his hands, wouldn't let go even when they pulled him onto the stretcher. Claire listened, caught between sorrow and awe. So the letter survived the fire? It must have, Martha said. They rebuilt part of that building. I suppose it got sealed inside a wall during the repairs. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the fire filled the silence, cracking softly. Then Martha said, "You came a long way, Miss Evans. If you want to open it, do it here." Bobby would have wanted that. Claire hesitated. She unzipped her bag, pulling the envelope free. Its surface gleamed faintly in the lamplight, edges brittle but intact. The seal gave a faint sigh as she lifted the flap with a letter opener. The paper inside unfolded with care. Lines of blue ink faded but still legible. She began to read. Martha listened, her knuckles white on the table's edge. "My dearest Lillian," the letter began. "If this finds you, it means the sun came up without me." Claire's voice shook. She cleared her throat and continued. "Don't cry for me, Lil. I'm where I need to be watching the boys, keeping them steady. I told Bobby to bring you this. He promised, and he always keeps his word." The words blurred for a second as Claire blinked hard. She read on. "You once asked what scared me most. It wasn't dying. It was you forgetting that I existed. So I'm writing this to remind you that even out here, in all this noise, you're what keeps me breathing." Her voice grew softer. "If Bobby hands you this letter, tell him I made it through the night. Tell him I saw the sunrise. That's what I promised him. And now, it's what I promise you." Claire folded the letter back carefully, her heart pounding. Martha's eyes shimmered in the firelight. "He saw the sunrise," she whispered. "After everything. He really did. When we ready in the naps of God from the saying." Then Martha reached for another photograph from the shelf. It showed Bobby in a hospital bed, holding the same tin now sitting between them. A faint smile crossed her face. He said, "I kept his word. That was the last thing he ever told me before the infection took him." Claire leaned back, the story settling heavy in her chest. "So he never delivered it because he thought it would hurt her more?" Martha nodded slowly. "He thought the truth was too cruel. He wanted her to remember Jack as alive somewhere out there." Lightning flashed through the window, casting the room in stark white. The storm pressed against the glass, wind moaning like distant artillery. For a moment, it felt as though time had folded, pulling the past into the present. Claire whispered, "I think it's time she knows." 54 years late, but it's still his voice. Martha smiled faintly. "Then take it. Finish what they started." As Claire gathered the letter and bracelet, Martha reached out, her grip unexpectedly strong. "When you give it to her, tell her something from me." "What?" "That Bobby kept his promise too. He brought Jack home, just took him a while." Outside, rain hammered the porch roof. Claire stepped out into the storm, tucking the envelope under her coat. Thunder cracked overhead, echoing like distant gunfire. For an instant, she imagined two silhouettes in combat gear walking beside her, one steady, one limping, both smiling. She stopped under a flickering streetlight, breath misting in the cold air. In her pocket, the letter warmed like a heartbeat. She pulled out her phone, recording a quick voice note. File reference Echo Wolves. Jack Monroe. Mission complete. Pending delivery. As she slid behind the wheel, a single line from the letter replayed in her head. "Tell him, I saw the sunrise." Through the rain-streaked windshield, the horizon began to brighten. A faint strip of pink edged the clouds morning, pushing through the gray. She started the car. The wipers swept away the last of the storm. In the rearview mirror, the Hale house glowed like a lantern in the fog, shrinking behind her as she drove. The radio flickered to life mid-static. A man's voice came through, broken, distant. "Echo Wolves, this is Monroe. Sunrise achieved. Over and out." Claire's breath caught. Static swallowed the signal. She glanced at the dashboard clock. 5:42 a.m. She drove on in silence, one hand over her heart, the other steady on the wheel. The letter lay beside her again, safe, waiting for its last stop. Through the windshield, dawn finally broke a thin line of gold, climbing higher, the same color as the ink on the page. The promise had waited half a century. Now, it was almost home. The rain had stopped by the time Claire reached Greenville again. The clouds were thinning, the sky pale and bruised from the storm. In the passenger seat, the envelope sat, like it knew this was its last ride. Rose Hill Senior Living looked the same, quiet. Sunlight spilling through the trees. Claire walked through the front doors, her shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Lillian Hart was waiting by the window, wrapped in a cream blanket, eyes bright with a calm that only age could grant. Claire knelt beside her, pulling the letter from her bag. "I found him, Mrs. Hart," she said softly. "And I found the man who promised to send this." "Yes." Lillian's breath caught as Claire placed the envelope in her trembling hands. For a moment, she only stared at it, her thumb tracing the faint blue ink. The room fell into a silence so deep it hummed. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, Lillian broke the seal. The paper crackled like an old voice waking from sleep. She unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning the faded words. When she spoke, her voice was steady but fragile. "He said he wasn't afraid," she whispered. "Said he just wanted me to remember him in the sunrise." Her fingers brushed a tear from the corner of the page. Then she smiled, the kind that comes from finally understanding something too long unsaid. Claire sat quietly, letting the moment breathe. Outside, the wind stirred the chimes by the door. A soft metallic echo, gentle, almost musical. Lillian folded the letter once more and placed it against her chest. "Thank you," she murmured. Claire shook her head. "I only delivered it." "No," Lillian said, her voice clear now. "You kept a promise two men couldn't." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver chain. It was the bracelet, polished, repaired, engraved words still sharp. "Until I return." She handed it to Claire. "He'd want you to have it. For finding your way back." Tears stung Claire's eyes. The bracelet felt cool and impossibly light in her palm. For the first time since discovering the letter, she felt the weight of all those years lift from the room. When she left the building, the sun was just rising. Golden light spilled over the parking lot, painting everything in soft gold, the same hue Jack Monroe had written about in his final line. Claire stood there for a long moment, watching the sky burn open. She whispered, "He made it to sunrise after all." Later that day, she returned to the old Wyndham post office. The building was silent, half empty, demolition signs nailed to the door. She stepped inside one last time, dust swirling in the afternoon light. At the old wall of mailboxes, she found slot number 214, the one that had hidden Jack's letter. She pulled out a small note card and wrote in neat print, "Letter delivered. Promise kept. C.E. 2024. She slid it inside and closed the door. The latch clicked softly, final and satisfying. As she turned to leave, sunlight caught the edge of the metal and flared bright, like a brief salute from something that understood. Outside, a demolition crew was unloading equipment. One of the workers paused, pointing toward the wall. "Hey," he said, "there's another one in here." Claire stopped, glancing back. The man reached into a lower slot and pulled out a second sealed envelope, wax green, edges unburned. He frowned. "Different name this time. Corporal Dean Weller." Claire smiled faintly, her heart catching that same quiet rhythm again. Guess some promises just don't like to stay buried. She slipped her hands into her coat pockets, feeling the silver bracelet against her wrist. Then she walked into the morning light, the echo of rotor blades, gunfire, and a voice from 54 years ago fading gently behind her. Sunrise achieved, over and out. The story was finished. But the promise had only just begun.